Well, hi everyone. I'm John Rithlin with a retro review of Sleepaway Camp. This one was voted by you guys on Twitter, and I figured, well, why not? I've seen this movie a few times before. Let's see how it's aged. This came out in 1983, so obviously, like any movie that came out in the 80s or even, a couple decades ago, even the 90s, some things are going to age poorly. But when it comes to a slasher movie like this is one of the most underappreciated slasher movies ever. I mean, at least in my personal opinion. It did have a whopper of an ending, even though if you look back on it, it was very obvious from the beginning what the ending was going to be. And it's a very streamlined slasher movie. Everybody's a caricature. This almost could have been a stage play with just some slasher elements to it because it was limited sets, limited budget, limited acting, and it was very much a cheap movie. Now, I'm not saying like it was bad, but it was obviously made for maybe a million, maybe $1.5 million. I don't even know what the budget of this was, but I can't imagine it was all that much. And any of the actors, I don't want to say were no names, but they hadn't really been in all that much. And unfortunately, the director only directed this and Return to Sleepaway Camp, which came out in 2008. And if you want a little bit of a history of the Sleepaway Camp movies, this was the best one, and you don't need to bother with any of the others. Even though the fourth one kind of tied, back to this one, yeah, this one was definitely the best. So, how does it hold up? Pretty goddamn well, because the death scenes are pretty good, and there's this overlying feeling of just like something's not right with the main character of Angela. So you have the opening part where you have the opening credits and just over the camp, heavy New York accents, all this stuff. And you have a dad and his friend who's on the shore. His dad's playing with his kids, a boy and a girl. And then a Boeing accident happens where one of them is killed. And the dad is killed as well. So, the little girl goes to live with some family friends and has a cousin, Ricky. And as they grow up, Ricky is very protective of Angela. There are reasons for this. There are major reasons for this, even though if you've seen the movie, you already know what those are. He's almost overprotective, and you're thinking, oh, is this an incestuous thing? What is going on exactly? No. Turns out that there's a whole lot more going on, even though, again, it is obvious if you've seen any movies. But the movie handles it pretty goddamn well and builds it where, even though the ending is obvious, they have some really good death scenes and some pretty, obviously a lot of the characters are cliches. There's the bully characters. There's, Ricky, the overprotective cousin. There's the boy that Angela falls for named Paul. And there are camp counselors, some that treat Angela well, some that don't treat Angela well. There's the very obvious pedo cook. My God, he is so obviously a pedo, it's like beating you over the head with it. So thankfully, I mean, outside of the first two deaths, the dad and the sibling, he is the first one to go at the camp, which is fitting. He gets burned badly and then gets taken off, and that's what should happen to all pedos. They should all suffer horribly for what they do and for what they are. But that was something else. Had a giant pot, like this insanely high pot of like stew and corn or whatever it was. It got tipped over on him. Was this used to feed like an entire army? Why was that there? Why was that comically large pot there? But again, picking on slasher movie tropes, it was what it was. One thing is the camp head Phil. He is wanting to cover all this up because he offers the rest of the crew, the cooking crew and the cleaning crew, extra raises. Well, hey, let's just take his money and give it to you guys, but let's not say anything because I want to keep this camp open. Camp Arawak, which is still a safer destination than most places in Florida right now, if you know why I'm saying that. But honestly, I mean, it gives Camp Crystal Lake a run for its goddamn money with how poorly it's run. And you got the typical activities, volleyball, baseball, a poorly maintained baseball field, by the way. It's like that thing had not had the grass cut in about a year. You couldn't even see the goddamn mounds, but it was not the most well kept together camp. So you get the one thing about this movie, besides the 80s fashions, were the uncomfortable short shorts on everybody. I can't imagine those were easy to walk around in. It's like they were cutting off circulation. For God's sakes, I'm amazed everybody in the movie wasn't a goddamn falsetto. Just really, really uncomfortable. I mean, then granted, it was in the 70s also, but just how did anybody think that looked good? It just couldn't have been comfortable. So Angela doesn't talk much. She gets bullied and then eventually talks to the guy Paul. It's like 30 minutes in before she says anything. And There was this there was this one bully kid that gets tipped over during a canoe date, and then he gets drowned. Oh no, he gets found in this tipped over canoe where they tip. It's like this camp counselor tips it over, and oh god, his body's there. He's got a snake crawling out of him, a water snake. And more of these deaths keep happening, and everybody's just wondering what's going on, like how in the world is this happening? Because they never show the killer. They never even give it a hint beyond like a hand who the killer could be, even though it's so fucking obvious who the killer is. But why is the killer doing this? Because that's always the underlying thing. It's like sometimes it's scarier when you don't know who the killer is, but or at least don't know why the killer is doing what they're doing. But we have a camp counselor, Meg, who gets upset at Angela. Well, you don't want to go in the water. You don't want to do this, despite the fact that anybody who read up on this would have known. Oh yeah, her dad and her dad and brother died in a boating accident. You might not want to go in the water. And also one thing about that opening sequence, they are literally 50 feet from the shore. They're 50 feet from the shore, at least from the looks of it. They could have swam under that boat and then gotten back to the shore before that boat hit them. That's something that always kind of bothered me about. But again, picking on stuff. The director, first-time director, actually did a pretty damn good job. I don't know why he didn't get more opportunities. Was he a bad person? Did nobody see this movie? Evidently, this movie wasn't as popular. It had to achieve cult status a lot later, but this is one of those that should not be forgotten about, as it obviously did not, start the slasher genre. You could go all the way back to Peeping Tom. You could go, and definitely Halloween, 1978, popularized it the most. But this is one that just always seems swept under the rug. It's a very underappreciated one. Anyway, let's get back to this. So we get some water balloons get thrown. One gets thrown at Angela. Ricky, once again, very protective, very protective. And Phil thinks that Ricky's doing these murders. Doesn't know why, but he's bound and determined. He just suddenly decides that Ricky's doing that because Ricky's always protecting Angela. So obviously it's got to be the guy. Can't be the girl doing it. And one line that always makes me laugh, it's like, well, I'll join you first, but I got to take a wicked dump first. Who talks like that? Who talks like that? I know I talk weird, but what the hell? And then this guy gets trapped in a bathroom stall that I think he could have climbed out of. I don't think there was a roof on it. I think he had enough room, but somebody cuts through the netting there and drops a nest of wasps, bees, hornets on a stick, and he gets stung to death. There were a lot of things in this little area. There were a lot of those wasps or hornets. A lot of them. I mean, maybe he was allergic. Maybe they were, maybe they had acid in them. I mean, I don't know, but it was kind of a comical death. And then we get weird dream sequences, or are they dream sequences? Flashbacks, so to speak. Ricky and Angela as they're younger. And then the dad and his best friend, a guy by the way, in bed together. Okay, weird. Don't know why they felt the need to show that. But does it have an underlying theme to it? Obviously it does. And Paul and Judy, hook up. Angela sees this. Angela's not happy because she kind of opened herself up a little bit to Paul, even though Paul was a little bit, he was a typical teenage boy in the sense that he probably didn't mean to, but he got a little forceful, and he shouldn't have gotten forceful. And it's not okay to get forceful, so let's not do that. And then this one girl, Meg, the bully counselor, gets stabbed through the shower curtain. You know what? I'm going to demand it be called that, but the shower curtain. I'm just going to make that the hashtag. But she gets stabbed through the shower curtain. So it's not quite the psycho death, but just stabbed all the way down her spine. She dies. And then the killer washes off the blood barely off of this knife. It's like maybe they wash off like half the blood. It's just so funny. And so, a little bit later, some of the boys are camping with one of the counselors. They suddenly want to go home. What the hell's going on? There's this weird hatchet there that's going to be used a little bit later. And then Angela says basically to Paul, hey, wait a second, you have to do social. Meet me by the waterfront. It seems like Angela's becoming a little more unhinged. Maybe she knows something. Maybe she's the killer, obviously. I mean, duh. You knew that from the beginning. And then Judy is curling her hair and then gets pillow stuffed over her face and gets that stabbed through. And it's weird because it's to muffle the screams, but how is the thing that hot that it could burn right through the pillow? Wouldn't it take like a little bit? I mean, again, logic. But the counselor comes back after, he finds that everybody is dispatched in the sleeping bags. I mean, you don't see that happen, but you see the blood in the sleeping bags, and it's about 4 or 5 people, maybe 6. There's a lot of murder taking place at this. And then Phil gets Ricky, beats him up. He's like, you little shit, you did this, you're trying to ruin my life. And he beats him up, but Ricky doesn't die, despite the fact that he hits him at least 20 times. I mean, he hits him quite a bit. I mean, he hits him a lot. But then he goes out to this target thing that just happened to be there, his arrow target, and says, oh, it's you. No, it can't be you. And he gets an arrow through the throat. So it's not Ricky. Although we all fucking knew that. We all knew who it already was. And then we get, a couple of the counselors, they find Angela, and she's stroking Paul's head on the beach and everything, and it's all dark, and we don't know what's going on. Suddenly we get some flashbacks. And the mother, by the way, the mother to Ricky, incredibly overacting, just like this goddamn boisterous stage play voice, almost like from the 30s or 40s. Actually, if you've ever seen the Mystery Science Theater episode Teenage Strangler, she acts just like the mom. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what the tone I'm going to take. But talks about, well, I've always wanted a little girl after my husband left. I wasn't able to have one or whatever. It's like, well, Richard will get home. He'll be so happy to see a little girl. Angela. Oh, that means that means the name of an angel. I think that's a much better name, don't you, Peter? It's the boy. It wasn't Angela. It was the boy made to be a girl. So no wonder the kid was fucked up. And the counselor says, oh, God, it's like, my God, she's a boy. And the thing about the ending is you have you have Angela's face there, and just like this, this angry, kind of, I can't even impersonate it, but it's like really just angry and like holding a knife, and obviously a boy. Apparently it was a college boy or a boy, in college, that they got to play him, or, got to play this, this part right here, play a boy dressed up like a girl, or a girl dressed up like a boy, and had to get so drunk because they were uncomfortable being naked on camera, which I guess would make sense. But that closing shot of the face and that noise will easily stick out in my mind for, I would say, ever. Because as far as horror movies, it's very, again, streamlined. It's very basic. But it does have a hell of an ending, and it easily one of the best endings in horror movie history, I would argue. I mean, especially in at least slasher movie history, because it sets up all this stuff where if you're smart to horror movies, you're going to figure it out. If you lose yourself, you might get shocked, but does that make the ending any less impactful? No, it's actually pretty goddamn good. And there are some good death scenes in it. Don't watch Sleepaway Camp 2 or 3. I mean, I'm not even getting, I think Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers, I don't remember what 3 was called. And then 4 sat on the shelf for 5 years and then got released in 2008. Because of lack of funding. I wish I was kidding. Sadly, 4 could have worked if it wasn't like a 5-year delay. But it's unfortunate that this series wasn't actually able to be maintained as anything decent. I mean, even 2 and 3 were filmed within 6 weeks of each other. But this one stands out. This one, yeah, it's basic. Yeah, there are a lot of cliches and caricatures and stuff like that. And there's a lot of silliness about it. But there's silliness about most slasher movies. And the ending is what sets it apart, and the build-up and everything, and the fact that, yeah, somebody wants a kid of a certain gender so bad, they're going to royally fuck up the mind of, a child that isn't that particular gender. They're going to make them live as somebody they're not. Or maybe somebody they are. They're just going to fuck up their mind and everything. So, yeah, that was a bit of a mind fuck of an ending, but let me know what you guys thought of Sleepaway Camp. I know it's been a number of years, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.